Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Today I'll be cutting a half circle flared skirt. This is the material I'm working with. It's a 2 trouser crepe fabric, my tape measure, my office pin, my scissors and my chalk. So let's get started on the tutorial. First thing to do is to fold my fabric on the buyer side. So how do you fold your fabric on the buyer side? You take one edge of the self edge and you fold it like this in a cone shape. That's how to fold a fabric on the buyer's side. So after doing that, the measurements I'll be working with is I just need 2 measurements. That is the length of my skirt, which will be a high waist skirt, and the width of the round width. That's my waist measurement, immediately the upper waist measurement, which is immediately under the bust. So let's get started on the markings. So after folding my fabric on the buyer's thumb, the next thing to do now is to mark out my measurement on the fabric. So let's get started. So my waist measurement is 28 because I folded my fabric into 2. This is the folded edge and this is the opened part. So I'll divide that 28 by 4 since I'm cutting 2 halves. So this is the first half and it will be the front part of the skirt. So 28 divided by 4, that is 7. 7 plus 1 inch seam allowance, that's 8 inches. So I will chalk out my 8 inches on my fabric, 8 inches on this side and 8 inches on this side. Then I will connect the lines together. So this is for the waist part. So I'll go, the skirt length I'm working with is 40 inches. So that 40 inches, because I'm going to add 1.5 inch band at the upper part, so I'll remove that 1.5 inches from the 40 inches. That is 38.5. So with that 38.5, I'll add 1 inch to the 38.5, half inch for the seam allowance to be added to the band here, and half inch for the hem allowance at the down part. So I'll show you how I'll mark out my down part. This is the upper part, so I'll mark out my down part now. From this part, I'll place my tape measure and mark out my, I said 38.5 inches plus 1 inch. That is 39.5 inches. So I'll start by marking out my 39.5 inches. From here, this is my 39.5. I'll make sure that my hand is on this part and I'll move my tape measure to the forward. So I'll mark out my 38.5 also here and I'll connect it with the one I marked here. I'll move my tape measure on the upper part and I'll do that because I'm cutting out a circular skirt. It must be equal. The 39.5 inch must be equal. I'll mark it out again and connect my line from here, 39.5. I'll repeat the process till I reach the last end of the folding, 39.5. I'll place it here and I'll mark out my 39.5 here too. Then I can extend it to make the measurement equal, because I'm using a freehand sketch. So I've connected all my markings, 38.5. This is it. This is my marking on the down part and my marking on the other part. So the next thing to do now is to cut out the markings, and I'll show you the next thing to do after that. So after cutting out my markings, the next thing to do now is to cut the back part of my skirt. This is the front part, this will be the sides, this will be the middle part of the skirt. So the next thing to do is that I'll place this one after laying down my back part, I'll place this one on it. But let me show you the process. So I've repeated the same process of folding for the back part too, but before I place my front part on the back part, I'll need to mark out my zip allowance at the back first. So I will need my tape measure, my chalk and my ruler for the zip allowance. So let's get started. So from the upper part of the fabric like this, I'll take my tape measure. I'll mark out 1 inch. 1 inch is what I'm using for my zip allowance. You can decide to use more, but to avoid it from being bulgy, so I'm using 1 inch. So I'll mark out my 1 inch down to the end of the fabric. I'll make sure that the markings are not too far from each other, so as to give me a straight line. I'm using the easiest method to avoid it from giving me two cuttings. So this is what I'm trying to do. After chalking it out, then I'll use my office pin to hold this down instead of cutting out. I'm supposed to cut out this zip allowance, but instead of that, to avoid giving me different pieces, I want my piece of fabric for skirt to be in a whole part. So I don't want it to give me different pieces. Instead of it giving me two pieces from this, it will just give me one piece. So I'll use my ruler to connect the lines. So after cutting out the front part of my fabric, I folded the remaining fabric on the bias foam, the same process I used in folding the front part of my skirt. So after folding it, this is the open part and this is the closed part. So the next thing I did was to mark out 1 inch to the down part of the fabric for the zip allowance. This is the back part. Now I cut out the front part. This is the back part. I measured 1 inch down to the end of the fabric. So the next thing to do is that I will use my office pin to hold it down. That will be my zip allowance before placing the front part of my cutout of the skirt, before placing it on it to cut out. So after holding the chopped out part with the head of office pin, it is very essential. This is my zip allowance part. I did that because I don't want to divide it into two after cut out first. So that's why I marked it out and I held the two pieces, the folding. I held it down with the head of an office pin. So the next thing to do now is to place the front part that I have cut out on this pack, and I'll ensure that I avoid the marked out edges. So this is what I'll do. This is it. I'll make sure this side is rhyming with this side, but I will make sure I'm avoiding this line because it will be the zip allowance. So this is it. I will make sure it is well aligned towards the down part, and I'll show you the next thing to do. After placing the front part on the back part, and ensuring that the placing is well aligned, the next thing to do now is to cut it out. I'll cut out. So before I go down to the down part, I'll make sure I notch the center of the front and the center of the back. So I'll cut out the down part too, and I'll show you the next thing to do. So I've cut out the back part too. The next thing to do now is to cut out the band. So I'll keep this one, I'll put it aside and cut out the band. I don't forget I said I'll be using 1.5 inch. So that doesn't mean I'll cut out 1.5 inch. 1.5 inch plus the 1/2 inch hem allowance. That means I'll be cutting out 2 inches unfolding. That means if I unfold it, I'm going to have 4 inches. Unfolding it will give me 2 inches. So these are my bands. The front part of the band, this is it. I cut out, this is 2 inches by 16 inches. The reason why I have 16 inches is that the waist measurement is 28 divided by 4, that is 7. But you know, this is not unfolding, so I'm not dividing it by 4. I'm just dividing it by 2. So 28 divided by 2 is 14 inches. So 14 inches plus 1 inch sewing allowance on each side. You know, when I folded the fabric into 2, I added 1 inch sewing allowance. So when it is opened, that 1 inch will turn to 2 inches. So 14 inches plus the 2 inches sewing allowance, that is 16 inches. So 16 inches, this is 16 inches by 4 inches when I open it up. When it is folded, it is 2 inches. This is for the front part of the skirt, and this is for the back part of the skirt. This is 4 inches when opened. 4 inches by 80 is that the 28 inches divided by 2, since it's for the back part, so divided by 2, that is 14 inches. Then my 14 inches plus 1 inch sewing allowance at each side, that's 2, that's 16 inches. 16 inches plus the 1 inch zip allowance too on each side, because when I cut out my folding, it will give me 1 inch on each side. So that is 14 plus 2 plus 2 again for the zip allowance. That is 14 plus 2 is 16 plus 2 is 18. So that's why I have 18 inches for the width of my back pad and 16 inches for the width of my front band. So the next thing to do is to cut out the pocket part. So I'll take the remaining fabric, from the remaining fabric and fold it. The one I know that will be enough, and I'll just fold it into 2. Then I'll chalk it out because for my pocket. So I'll just trace it out like this. Then I'll cut it out. So I'll repeat the process for the second side of the pocket. So these are my cuttings, my pocket, my band, and my skirt cuttings. This is the front part, and this is the back part. So for the sewing, the first thing I will do is to stitch this line to the end, the line that I chalked out, the 1 inch. I'll stitch it, and then I'll fix. After stitching it, I'll take the front part of the fabric, I'll take it and I'll place it. I will ensure that the front part is facing the front part. Then I'll place it on this side, I'll join it to the end. I'll do that for the second part too. I'll join it to the end, This is what it will give me. This is my skirt. Then I will join my bands and I will join my pocket. Then the first thing to do is to stitch the zip allowance all through the upper part of the skirt, of the back part of the skirt, with the 1-inch sewing allowance. Then after that, you join your bands to your skirt. The front part of your skirt, you join the front band, and the back part of the skirt, you join the back band too. So I joined the band using 1/2-inch sewing allowance on each side of the skirt. So after which I came to the side, I took the front part of the skirt and the front part of the front part of this front part and the front part of the back part. I took it together like this, and I stitched it using the 1-inch sewing allowance all through to the down part of the skirt. After which I opened up the zip allowance part that I closed. I opened it up to the part I wanted to connect, to the part I connected this zip. You can decide to open it up all through, but I just decided to open it to the only part I'm attaching the zip. So the next thing to do after then is to hem the edges of the skirt. I've already done that, and so having completed that, the next thing to do now is to fix the pocket to the sides of the skirt. So I'll take my tape measure and measure. This is the upper part of the skirt, from the band part. That's where the upper part of the skirt is starting from. So from that part, I measure 3 inches to the down part, 3 inches from this part to this part, 3 inches. So I use my chalk to chalk that, to mark that out, and from that 3 inches, from this point, I will measure 6 inches. Then I will mark that one out, and with the aid of my seam ripper, I already joined it. I loosened the seams to open it up for the pocket. So having done that, the next thing to do now is to show how the pocket is fixed to the skirt. So this is one of my pockets. This is the wrong side of the pocket. I joined it using 1/2-inch sewing allowance. Then I knitted it appropriately. So next thing to do now is to turn it to the right side. Then I will insert it like this. I will insert, after which this stitch part, I will ensure that it's facing this stitch part too, the upper part of the skirt. I will ensure it's aligning with it. So I'll place it like this and take it to my machine to join it all round. And I'll show you the final look of the pocket. I'll do that for the other side of the skirt too, and I'll come back to show you that. So I've joined the pocket to the sides of the skirt, and thus my skirt is complete. So this is the outcome of the pocket. After joining the pocket to the side, then I'll close up the extra openings. I close it up, and this is the final look of my skirt. This is it on the wrong side of the skirt, and this is it on the right side. You see, it's not showing except I open it up. It's not showing. The next thing to do is to press my skirt neatly and show you the final outcome of my skirt.